Alan, all right.
Yep.
So we're going to bring up your sexiest players of the week. Take it away, my friend.
All right. Well, I got to tell you, I was pretty disappointed when I looked up most of these. You have that stat thing we go to, that fantasy stat thing. That's kind of our baseline for where we kind of look for a lot of our stuff. How much would they have scored in fantasy? And the main guy I came up with the first is Zach Wilson, quarterback, BYU, 325 passing yards, which is not really a lot of passing yards, but he had 2 touchdowns passing. He also had 43 yards rushing for 3 touchdowns. So the 5 touchdowns total is kind of what pushed me over the edge there. But overall, like I said, just not impressed with the numbers and what we had to choose from. Next up, I had Reggie Roberson Jr., wide receiver from Southern Methodist. 5 receptions for 243 yards and 3 touchdowns. 243 yards on 5 receptions. It's like a typo almost, it seems. That's crazy. Those are insane stats. I mean, that's almost 50 yards a catch. Okay, that's crazy. And they beat Memphis over the weekend. I have another guy from SMU I'll get to in a second, but right now you mentioned him earlier, Khalil Herbert, running back from VT. I believe it was you, it may have been Houston, but had 208 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, anytime you go over 200 yards in a game, that's pretty impressive, right? So he had a great game in there, win over Duke. The other SMU player I had was Shane Michelle, former Texas quarterback. He had 474 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also added 27 rush yards in their win against Memphis. Pretty solid day for him. It was just rough looking through all these players. I'm looking for those eye-popping stats, like KJ Costello had with a 600 yards passing and all that kind of stuff, and it just really wasn't there. There was no Kyle Pitts, 4 touchdowns, wasn't there. But Matt Corral, quarterback for Ole Miss, 320 passing yards. Again, relatively average, but not bad. 4 touchdowns, 51 rush yards when they beat Kentucky 42-41. So we had some decent performances, but I really expect most weeks to be a lot sexier than this, but not too bad.
Well, I would agree with Matt Corral. I think there's a lot of people in national media talking him up big time. And Houston and I talked about, I believe when you were out, Al, we talked about Memphis and why they weren't back up there, because I believe they won the conference last year and they beat Cincinnati back to back, but then they were projected to be 3rd or 4th in the conference. And Houston and I kind of dived into their depth chart, and it ended up being because of their defense. They really didn't have a bunch of all conference guys left on their defense. They lost a lot for Memphis. And so obviously that shows in the results that SMU was able to put up. Interesting note for me, though, is going back to kind of like a Chad Morris situation. Do you think, and I'll start with you, Houston, here, do you think that something's wrong with Chad Morris? I mean, Chad Morris is kind of left Clemson, and Clemson's still doing okay. He's left Arkansas. Arkansas seems to be doing better. He left SMU. They seem to be doing the same or better. He went to Auburn, and they didn't really look very good against a stout defense last Saturday. So is Chad Morris kind of like, I mean, go figure, Auburn Tigers have 2 formerly released coaches from Clemson as their coordinators. But is Chad Morris, is there something wrong with Chad Morris right now? Is he being figured out by defenses?
It could be that case. I'm not willing to throw that on Chad Morris just yet. All conference schedule, all this kind of stuff. And then your second game is Georgia. You're still coming to form with that team. Bunch of young running backs. But I will say this, you don't see Chad Morris teams get held under 50 yards rushing generally. And if that's the case, it's pretty bad. And I think there might have been some bad days early on with Clemson in 2011. I remember the NC State game in 2011 where nothing went right, or the South Carolina games, really all of his tenure except for the last one with Deshaun. Nothing seemed to go right on the ground. But you have a point. This could be that he's been around long enough. His tendencies might be out there to where a more talented defensive coordinator could pick up on it. But I'm still not willing to say that just yet, given that we've got 8 more games left on the SEC schedule.
Okay, Al, do you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest, and this is, I'm sure I'll get blasted for this pretty well, but I was never the biggest Chad Morris fan when he was at Clemson. I like Chad Morris. Now, let me be very clear. I love Chad Morris much more than what we had. Let me be very clear on that, Clemson fans. But I thought he outthought himself a lot of times. I thought he got cute. I particularly remember playing South Carolina, driving right down the field, running down their throat, and then he runs the pass option with Sammy Watkins, and he gets picked off in the end zone. It was just an atrocity. It was all downhill from there. We never did recover from that. But I thought he had several moments like that where he just tried to get too cute when his regular plan was perfect. So I'm not willing to say that it's him and they figured him out. Again, he ran into Georgia's defense. Okay, that's tough. That's tough. Is you don't like Bo Nix, that if he's kind of hamstrung by what he's got and the ability of his quarterback. I think Bo Nix is a solid starter, but I mean Georgia's defense is going to make a lot of people look bad this year for sure. They've got all kind of speed and all kind of ability. But no, I don't think that people have necessarily figured Chad Morris out. I think he's gonna be okay. I think offensive coordinator is his strong suit for sure. I like him as a coordinator better than a head coach. But he'll settle in somewhere, I believe.
I feel like that later on in the years, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like they kind of got away from the run. They started doing too much of a hurry up. They started throwing the ball and basically getting in these really quick 3-and-outs. And when you run into a good defense, Taj Boyd had a lot of problems getting into really stout defenses and going 3-and-out really quick. And, Clemson struggling to compete in the time of possession or even move the ball. Sometimes I kind of felt like, was Chad Morris a little bit gimmicky, more of an Oliver Purnell football type guy, version of Oliver Purnell. I felt that way in some cases that when he left, Dabo Swinney came out and said, hey, we want to get more to be a more well-known power running team, but in the same kind of spread scheme. And so, they have gone away from some things I felt like that Chad Morris instilled and have morphed now into Tony Elliott style. And there's pros and cons to that as well, too. But we'll see what Chad Morris can do because it does seem like that he's struggling to find his place and in success for sure.